from Belle's Book Reviews again, and today we're going to be reviewing Pretend She's Here by Luanne Rice. So before we start, I'd like to apologize in advance to those of you who haven't yet read this book, who, by the way, I advise that you guys go and actually read the book before watching my book reviews, because I will be spinning out quite a few spoilers, and I don't like spoiling books for people because that's no fun. Anyway, so I apologize in advance to any of you who insist on watching this book review before you finish the books. Anyways, so this was an interesting and fun book about 16-year-old Emily Lonergan. Her best friend was Lizzie Porter, who died from a cancer a year prior. Her mother was an alcoholic who had been sober for about a year. She turned sober after accidentally leaving Emily alone and forgotten after a school play. Anyways, I'm going to tell everybody out there, all of you guys who are watching this video, that two sides of me are really, really conflicted right now. One side of me says that Miss Porter, let's feel bad for her. Miss Porter is a good person. This side of me is going to tell you that she just did it out of guilt. But this side of me admits that yes, there has to be some grief in there, not guilt, but grief. So this side of me is going to say that Miss Porter is just mentally unstable, and that there's like a very small amount of grief in there, but there's that. So you'll hear me fighting with myself a lot during this video. Anyway, so Miss Porter, out of grief, kidnapped Emily, and Emily is imprisoned in their basement and is forced to pretend to be her late best friend. So this book was actually a really interesting and fun book. I would recommend it for ages 13 to 14 with a 4-year gap. It was a bit violent and it's terrifying. I mean, the language usage, I'm pretty sure you could read it much younger than 13, but this is a bit violent, yes, and it's somewhat terrifying, so I advise you don't read it under 13. It shows just how cruel the world is, whether or not you want to believe it, because if you look at Emily in this book, the Porter family, and she said it herself, was like Emily's second family. And after Lizzie passes away, Miss Porter kidnaps Emily a year after. So I kind of think about it like Miss Porter betrayed Emily somewhat, because Miss Porter, she was like a second mom, and suddenly she goes from second mom to abusive kidnapper. So honestly, that's how it's terrifying, and it's a bit violent every now and then because they do put her on some sleeping drugs and all. And there's that. Anyway, so I found out after doing a bit of research on this book that it is based on a true story, but I haven't found out exactly what story it's based off of yet. But when I do find out, then I promise I will tell you guys, keep you guys updated, and tell you exactly which case it is. And I'll tell you exactly which case it is on that week's video, so that if any of you guys are interested, you can research it. Anyway, I don't think there's actually an author's purpose. I do seem to be reviewing quite a few of these books, so I'm planning that maybe next week or a week after that, I'm going to actually review a book that has a meaningful author's purpose that actually makes you think about life. Anyways, I did find the theme though. The theme of this story is to show the negative impact of alcoholism, what grief can do to you, and what impact forgiveness can have on people. The alcoholism theme of this story comes out through Emily's mother. Emily's mother, as I said before, was an alcoholic, and I personally don't have much to say about this because I have no references. I have never experienced this, but I do believe, and I'm pretty sure this is just common sense, that alcoholism really negatively impacts everyone around you. And if you need to know your limits with alcohol, because when you don't, then you go out of control with alcohol, and it can seriously harm you and sometimes even lead to death. Anyway, so I think that Miss Rice is trying to show that you really do need to be careful around alcohol. On the other side, the grief, I have a lot more to comment on. So I really am trying to see and put Miss Porter in a better light, as I've said before, how she was driven by grief. I think that everything she does is just driven by an unbelievable amount of grief and some guilt, because she did like pour her heart out to Emily about why she's doing this. And she tells her when Lizzie was a baby, Miss Porter would look over Lizzie to check if Lizzie was breathing. So I think that it actually is part of guilt, because she says that eventually you stopped caring and then the illness came on so quickly. So I think she is somewhat guilty about kind of ceasing to care so much, and she kind of just stopped worrying that much. So I think there is a bit of guilt mixed into all this. But I still can't imagine how much pain she's going through right now, because she lost her daughter. So I really do feel bad for her, and when people are desperate, they tend to take drastic courses. I didn't think that she'd go such drastic ways where she kidnaps Emily and threatens to kill Emily's mother, but she does, and I was just amazed that she'd do such a thing. Anyways, this is why grief is a theme of the story. The third and last theme is the power of forgiveness. So forgiveness itself is a good thing. But the thing is, under some circumstances, forgiveness can hurt you. So these circumstances are very rare and you barely come across them in life. But when someone has done something unforgivable, then you insist on forgiving them, you'll find yourself in a lower and worse position. And eventually they will get the advantage of you. They will get the higher point of you. And you can't get out of it. They can even blackmail you eventually. So, for example, in Pretend She's Here, Emily finally calls the cops on Miss Porter, and they're searching the house and everything, and Emily finds Miss Porter crying downstairs. She hugs Miss Porter, and Emily forgives Miss Porter. And then Miss Porter ends up stabbing Emily. So that honestly just further proves my point about this. So honestly, if somebody does something unforgivable to you, there's no reason to forgive them. If someone does something unforgivable to you, then don't give them another chance. If you're a person for second chances, sure, go for it. Give them another chance. But after the second chance, I think that's literally your maximum. I don't think that it's gonna get you anywhere positive. I don't think it's going to get you anywhere if you give them chances over and over and over again. Because eventually it's not you giving them chances. It becomes a routine and they think they can do whatever they want to, which they can because you're going to forgive them one way or another. Anyways, there were a few things I liked about this book. I liked how Chloe helped Emily at the end of the book. Because overall, Chloe, I don't think she's a bad kid. Chloe, I feel like, was just manipulated by her mother and by grief for her lost sister. And that's the only reason why she helped her mother kidnap Emily. Because I do feel like she was genuinely sorry for Emily when she was kidnapping her. So honestly, I really do think that she was a genuinely good kid, and it was just grief and manipulation from her mother. I also liked how Emily had all these flashbacks of Lizzie, because I honestly think it was really sweet how she had all these flashbacks, because it just further proves how close their bond was, and it made me feel like they were a really close bond. I loved it and all. And I also liked how Casey figured everything out at the end, because the thing is, he thinks that she's the lost girl at first, and she denies it. So yes, of course, I am delighted when he finally finds out. Chloe calls the cops, and then finally, Emily can finally go back to her family. Something that I didn't like about this book, though, was when Miss Porter was forcing Chloe to do everything. Because, honestly, Chloe's a good kid, and how Miss Porter just manipulates her is honestly infuriating. And speaking of infuriating things, another thing that infuriated me about this book was how many times Emily has a chance to tell everyone, oh yeah, Lizzie, the real Lizzie is dead. The real Lizzie never went to Europe. Lizzie Porter is dead. I am Emily Lonergan, and Miss Porter has kidnapped me. She has all these chances to tell people, and she never takes them, because yes, I understand that she is worried for her mother, but really, really, all these chances she could tell people, and I'm sure they would believe her, except in the hospital, maybe they might have been a bit suspicious of her, and maybe they might have told her, okay, you need to get more rest, and maybe in the hospital that might have been a bad idea. But everywhere else, like with Casey, when they were sledding, the first time he asked her if she was the lost girl, all those times were perfect times to tell people that yes, she was the lost child and that she needed to go home. All these times were perfect opportunities, and she never takes them. So honestly, that was infuriating. It was also infuriating how I felt so bad for Miss Porter, because usually I have a very, very decisive opinion about books. But Miss Porter, I don't know what is with me, but I honestly feel so bad for Miss Porter, and I can't seem to make up my mind whether she's a good guy or a bad guy, because it makes perfect sense that she's the antagonist, but I feel bad for her, and I can't exactly say that she is the antagonist. I want to say that she is not mentally unstable and that she's fine, but I can't. And another thing I didn't like was how Miss Porter thinks that she doesn't even take what Emily would think into mind. Miss Porter, after Emily has thought of her as like a second mother for so long, Miss Porter, I feel like she betrayed Emily, and suddenly she turns on her, kidnaps her, and she's like heartless. She doesn't even care what Emily feels about this. So that's another thing I disliked about the book, and that's all I have to say about this book. I would give this book a 2 out of 5 stars, because I didn't exactly like this book all that much, because it kind of felt repetitive, and like you were kind of in a loop. Emily gets kidnapped, and then she has all these chances to tell people what's happening, and then eventually it just seems impossible. So it kind of seemed like the book was in a loop. So I didn't exactly like this book all that much, so I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5 stars. Thank you for watching, and I hope that this book review was actually somewhat helpful to you guys. Yeah. Bye.